Today, we are diving deep in what it means to be a rival in sports. On top of that, we're going over all of the top rivalries in each respective league. Finally, the MLS Cup Final is officially here with two dominating titans that are going to face each other. That's coming up next. It's the Lurks Lessons Show, your weekly deep dive into the most impactful stories from the professional sporting leagues around the country. We'll analyze, discuss, and uncover the lessons they offer. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Jeff Lurkey, and hey, if this is your first time, welcome to Lurks Lessons. And what is Lurks Lessons? Well, let me read it to you. A sports educational platform that helps you learn sports through animated content here on YouTube, with the show also being posted on Spotify. So if you like what you hear or see, stick around. I always like to say it off of the screen just because I try to say it verbatim in my mind and it just never works out. So hope you had a great Thanksgiving holiday weekend. We took last week off just to be with family, and it was much needed for myself, and it's good to be back. Although I feel like a little bit behind the eight ball just because with my day job, I'm a freelance animator / motion designer. I had a couple of deadlines that needed to get done today. So that kind of carved into this recording time. So I'm recording later in the day than normal. So I feel a little bit behind, but we still got a good show for you nonetheless. And so what are we going to be talking about? Rivalries. Okay. You can't just have good sports without a good rival. And so before we get into rivalries, I just want to give you an update on the channel. We are already full swing in production when it comes to the the upcoming Sports 101 football video that's going to go over offensive formations. I've already got the script done. I got the voiceover recorded and mixed, all ready to go. So that next step is then doing the designs and then taking the designs, pairing it with the audio, and then really dive into the animation. So again, the goal is to get it done way before, or hopefully way before the Super Bowl, because just based off of years past, that's usually the highest traffic of the channel is right before the Super Bowl, leading up to the Super Bowl. So to hopefully kind of ride that wave would be great. If I can get it done before the end of the year, even better. So I'm looking forward to that. Also on the franchise front with the board game, we just launched a brand new LLC that will look over the board game and then also subsequent games if it actually takes off, which is pretty cool. So we'll have a separate LLC attached to that. And along with I am designing all the updated stuff for the final prototype / product. So I got the new game board, this close design being done, and then I got to go into some other little aspects of the final design. So it is definitely coming along, which is great. And then also doing some research to figure out what I need to do to partner up with the right people along with contractors. So I'm very, very excited with that. But all right, all that to say is let's dive into rivalries. Okay, so you don't necessarily have a good sports narrative if you don't have a good rival. And I start off by saying it like that because sometimes the drama when it comes to sports is typically who you're playing against. And there's no better matchup than when you see two teams that are literally both each other's rivals. Sometimes one team may look at another team like, oh, they're our rivals, and they're like, oh, we are. Sometimes you will definitely get, though, like both teams just dislike each other. And so if you look at it even also in a championship perspective, like if both teams are in the championship, that just breeds way more drama to the narrative of both teams, okay? And so much so that I also have taken this rivalry concept and I put it into the board game franchise. And as you can see, right here behind me, if you're watching on YouTube and on Spotify, right behind me up here is the board game that I'm currently designing. And you'll see there's 4 mascots. And so each franchise they have their own rivals. So the green and the yellow teams are their respective rivals, and then blue and red. And so when you pick your franchise, you already have your rival established. And if you beat that rival, you get a bigger perk / you get a better ROI when you do defeat your rival. Okay, so all that to say is let's literally define what a rival is. And so I went online and I kind of found this one particular definition that I really liked. And so rivalry in sports can be defined as the intense competition between two or more teams, often fueled by factors such as geographic proximity, cultural differences, or historical significance. It encompasses not just the desire to win, but also the emotions and stakes that extend beyond the game itself, often rooted in shared history and competition. I think that was so eloquently put. It was probably from AI, but essentially that's kind of what it captures what a rivalry is. I feel like it hit the nose on the head with like the three differences. It could be geographic proximity, it could be a cultural difference, or it could be a historical significance to start the rival foundations. And then I would also add like the people and personalities also involved in the rivalry as well. And the next part of the show, we'll go into like the best rivalry in sports across all platforms. And so I will kind of dive into like some of the historical significance along with the personalities. But in large, like sometimes you'll see some individuals that would have origins on one team and then they would move to their rival. And then that would just further stew the pot, if you will, among the fan bases. I know the players themselves, when they play these games, they understand like, hey, no, that's our rival. We're going to do everything in our power to defeat them, to either salvage our season because we were not having a really good season, or we can disrupt their aspirations because since we didn't have a good season, we can destroy theirs by defeating them. And so it's just, I love rivalries because it makes me tune into the game that much more, to be honest with you. And so going into this next part of the show, now that we have established what a rivalry is, we can go into see what other big rivalries in all of the big sports when it comes to sporting leagues here in the States. Okay, because I mean, you can definitely go even to other countries and all their rivals as well, but I want to just focus here on the state side. Okay, so for the first one in the NHL, the longest and arguably long-standing rivalry is actually between two Canadian teams. It's the Montreal Canadiens against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, if you ever heard, anytime you watch the NHL or ever want to get into the NHL, you will hear this term called the Original Six. And essentially, back in its history, when the NHL was first formed, there was only 6 teams or 6 franchises that played for a significant amount of time before the NHL actually expanded. And these 2 teams were part of the Original Six. The other 4, if you're keeping track, and it can be a fun trivia question to answer, is the Boston Bruins, the New York Rangers, Detroit Red Wings. It's always hard for me to say that, Red Wings, and Chicago Blackhawks. So the 2 Canadian teams, Montreal and Toronto, are part of the Original Six, and the other 4 were in the States. Montreal, in general, I have to look at the numbers again. I kind of put this episode together real quickly, so forgive me of the stat. But if I'm not mistaken, Montreal has the most Stanley Cup wins by like a lot. It's like they're up with the Yankees when it comes to baseball with World Series. Montreal is like the pinnacle of like they have the most Stanley Cup wins. These 2 clubs still don't like each other. There's a lot of history. So I would say in this particular case, the historical significance is going to be the biggest reason why they don't like each other. Okay. So yeah, that's the first one. NHL, Montreal Canadiens, big rival is Toronto Maple Leafs. Mutual dislike. Let's move on to the NFL. Now, the NFL, they have a lot of fun little rivalries, but the one that I believe that takes the top of the crop, if you will, is the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers. And the reason why is because of the historic significance along with the geographic proximity. Because back when the NFL began back in like the 1920s, like these 2 clubs were one of the founding fathers, if you will. And especially back in the day, like there was a lot of football teams that ended up folding. Well, the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears are one of like the oldest franchises in the NFL. And so between the two, they have always been in the same division ever since, or better yet, in the same conference. So meaning like even from their original roots, they would always play each other every single year. And now with them being in the NFC North, they play each other twice every single year. So one away and one home. In addition to like even before the NFL had divisions, I mean, you can look at some of my videos on the channel, like you can actually see the history of how the NFL was formed. Like there's a lot of different ways where teams were moved around and shuffled around just to make it work. Green Bay and Chicago still were in the same cohort, if you will. So there's a lot of history with these two clubs. Green Bay obviously has a lot of Super Bowls. Chicago definitely has one, and they're actually doing pretty good right now, surprisingly. So I would say those two, I think they play this upcoming weekend too. So that's going to be a fun game to watch in the regular season because they're both fighting for the top of the pecking order of the NFC North. So that would be another great rivalry when it comes to the NFL. Moving to the NBA, I mean, this is a no-brainer. The LA Lakers, Boston Celtics. Now, both of these would be cultural differences, would be a huge one because back in the 80s is when the rivalry really took heat because of when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson respectively came into the league in 1980. Both of those guys were selected by the Lakers and Celtics. And throughout that decade alone, they faced each other, again, if I'm not mistaken, 3 times. And the Lakers got the best of them 2-1 to win the NBA Finals. But that entire decade, I think it was like maybe 1 or 2 years. Oh, I have to double check this. But both of them had arrived to the NBA Finals. They didn't necessarily face each other. Like I think the first year, 1980, the Lakers faced the 76ers, and that's where Magic Johnson, Rookie of the Year, ends up winning the NBA Finals and NBA Final MVP. I'm pretty sure it was the Sixers. Again, me just going off memory here. And then subsequently, like both squads ended up, winning an NBA franchise. Whereas in the 60s, when the quote unquote rivalry started, I would say it was more the Lakers couldn't stand the Celtics because in the 60s, poor Jerry West, who played for the Lakers, couldn't beat the Celtics. Like nobody could beat the Celtics in the 60s because of Bill Russell and company. But they would always find themselves playing against the Celtics and they couldn't defeat them. So there was this hatred of the Lakers against the Celtics. So anyways, there's so much history between those two squads. And like I would say not necessarily geographic proximity because literally they're on the edges of the country, one far west and one far east. But the cultural differences is up there, especially during the 80s where you had Showtime Lakers with Magic. Like they were the Showtime. Like there was all flash and pizzazz, whereas like the Celtics kind of prided themselves as a blue-collared, down and gritty, dirty kind of like basketball team. And here you go. You got like this massive, like great rivalry that kind of lasted until about in the early 90s until Michael Jordan came around and just pretty much put an end to it. But as throughout the entire years, like you'll see it every kind of pop up once in a while, especially here now, like when you're watching it, the NBA, it's just fun to see Lakers and Celtics, even in the regular season. Like there's so much history behind that one. Okay. And then we have Major League Baseball, New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox. Honorable mention would be LA Dodgers and San Francisco Giants. That's an honorable mention. But these two squads, New York and Boston, very, very deep history between the two. Back when baseball was back in its infancy, like these two squads would always play against each other. And here's where I would say what helps the rivalry is the personality and the people. Like the very beginning, Babe Ruth played for the Boston Red Sox, won a World Series with them, then gets traded to the Yankees, and then he goes off and just makes way more titles with the Yankees, becomes like this bigger than life figure. I mean, it's still one of the weirdest trades in the history of the sport. But like he's like the quintessential, like, wait a minute, you were on the Red Sox, then you got traded to the Yankees, like your rival, and then they end up winning how many World Series with him? Like, it's just like, wait, what? And then in recent memory, you have Johnny Damon. I remember Johnny Damon going from the Red Sox to the Yankees. So it's like that whole back and forth with personality still happens to present time. Now, Johnny Damon, that was about a handful of years ago, at least 10 years ago, but that's what happens. Like, it just creates the drama with it. And again, Boston and New York, close proximity. You also have, they're in the same division, so they play each other quite a bit, but the storylines get even more fun when it's in the postseason. And I think there was at one time where Boston was down 3-0. I think it was in the ALDS, American League Divisional Series, and no team has ever come back 3-0 in baseball until that team. That team ended up going on a 4-game win streak. Then they go into the ALCS, and then they go win the World Series. So I think that was in 2004, 2005. It was in the middle 2000s. And again, it was against a rival, right? So that's where, again, the drama just heightens when you go against your rival. So those are the big pro teams, okay? So in the collegiate level, in the men's basketball, Duke Blue Devils, North Carolina Tar Heels. I mean, you talk about close proximity. I mean, have you been to Chapel Hill? Have you been to Durham? Like, they're like, you get off on the interstate. Like, they're so close. You have Duke, the private school. You got North Carolina, the public school. And in between these two clubs, like, you get like future Hall of Famers. You get national championships. I mean, Coach K, Dean Smith, like, you got so much history with these two clubs. It's just awesome. Like, that's, and I know right now we're in the early stages of the college basketball season, but man, again, they're in the ACC together, so they play each other at least two times. They could play again in the tournament, and that's when they play against each other in the tournament at large, like in the NCAA tournament. Like, that's where it gets to be like fever pitch. So that is, if you're now starting to watch any of these sports, just make sure you write these down or circle it on your calendar, because those are the fun games to watch because of their rivals. And then last but not least, it happened this past weekend for college football, which is coined Rivalry Weekend. Usually at the end of the season, college sports or college football tries to schedule their main rival on this weekend, aka last weekend during Thanksgiving. And that one is Ohio State versus Michigan Wolverines. Like, there's a reason why it's called the game. It is the pinnacle of, I think, all three. Like, you got geographic proximity, cultural differences, and historical significance all wrapped into one. These two teams loathe each other to the point where they would not cheer for each other when they go into the postseason. You don't see that. I lived in the southern part of the United States for a period of time. I got to learn about the SEC fever, if you will, whereas there are rivals and they don't like each other, but they would still back their own horse, aka if they're part of the SEC, they'll still cheer for that team when it came to the postseason. Ohio State and Michigan, you don't see that. You just don't see that. You don't see an Ohio State fan cheering for Michigan to win the national championship, nor are going to see a Michigan fan trying to cheer for Ohio State to win the national championship. You just don't see it, okay? If you do see it, it's a unicorn. I'm just going to say that right now. It's unicorn. I just named off, like, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the main rivals when it comes to these leagues / college ranks. And yeah, let me know what your favorite rival is when it comes to sports in general. So leave a comment below, because I want to know. Obviously, there's honorable mentions. I mentioned the Dodgers and the Giants when it comes to Major League Baseball. I know in college football, you have the Iron Bowl with Auburn and Alabama. Like, nobody, it depends on who your rival is, okay? So let me know in the comments below.
Hey, I want to take a quick second and ask you, how well do you really know your sports history? Dive into every Super Bowl, every NBA Finals, and every World Series ever played with my new ebook collection, packed with stories, stats, and moments that made them unforgettable. They're all available right now on my website. Relive the greatest moments in sports history, one championship at a time. Now, back to the video.
All right, as I mentioned earlier in the show, this past weekend was Rivalry Weekend, and it's an awesome weekend for college football because it typically is like the last weekend of the season before you go into this upcoming weekend, which is championship weekend, where all of the conferences play for their champion, essentially. We already talked about the game with Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State came into the big house in Ann Arbor, with losing to their rival 4 straight years in a row. But prior to that, they won 8 straight years in a row. So they were hoping to end the skid, and they actually did. And so that was the last time they lost. So if you look back, the last time the Ohio State Buckeyes actually lost a game was to Michigan last year, when they lost to them at the Shoe in Columbus, Ohio, 13-10. And right now they've gone 16-0. Winning a national champion as well. So we'll see if they go back-to-back years, which would be pretty amazing, and if they could. But this weekend they have Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. So looking back, and we're just looking at all the other games that happened. And again, the whole focus of this show, this particular episode, is to talk about rivalries. As I mentioned before, I did live in the South for about a handful of years. That state was Mississippi. I lived near the capital, which is Jackson. And in that state, we talked about like the 3 things: cultural differences and geographic proximity. The Egg Bowl, which is between Mississippi State and Ole Miss, or University of Mississippi, that is a huge rivalry. Like, those 2 teams do not like each other. And right now, Ole Miss got the better of them, 38-19, when it comes to the football game. And it's just interesting to see that, because you have 2 different schools that excel at 2 different forms of academia. Mississippi State has a lot of great agriculture. It used to be Mississippi A&M because of agricultural stuff of that nature. And they also have some really other good programs, but typically, like, that's like a blue-collared school, if you will, whereas Ole Miss has a fantastic lawyer school, and they also have other high-profile jobs that you can get out of Ole Miss, and so that's typically a white-collared school. Depending on where you go, like, they're both great schools, but that is where you have the cultural differences, and you see that when you go to the respective colleges. And it's really cool, actually. I've been to both universities on site, and it's really neat to see the differences. But that happened last weekend. They played for the Egg Bowl. I mentioned the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama. They are also in state, and there's bragging rights that come with that, just like all the other rivalries. And so Alabama ended up beating Auburn 27-20, but Auburn almost had the best of them. And so that's the other thing too. When you play against your rival, you throw out the records, you throw out everything else, because for some reason, it's always going to be a hard-fought game against your rival. It's very rare that it's a lopsided victory when it comes to your rival. That is Rivalry Weekend. I was able to watch a couple of the games. It was fun to see. And those are just a few things. I know Notre Dame played Stanford. That could be considered a rival, but their main rival is USC, which would be interesting to see if they actually continue to schedule farther down the road, with USC being now part of the Big Ten. But whenever you watch college football, like, that is one thing that you always have to circle around, is the rivalry game. And as I mentioned, not all rivalry games, like their big main rival, play that weekend, this past weekend. Sometimes, like Oklahoma versus Texas, that is called the Red River Rivalry. That's very hard to say quickly. That happens usually earlier in the year. That happens usually earlier in the year. So that's where it's kind of interesting on how some schools may have multiple rivalries, but their main one is usually scheduled at the end of the year, okay? All right, as the last topic we'll talk about is the Major League Soccer Cup Final. And these past few games have been really, really fun to watch. And I have a bracket, and so I love brackets. So let's go ahead and show the bracket. There it is in all of its glory. So if you're looking at the screen right now, we have our final set. It's Inter Miami FC versus the Vancouver Whitecaps FC. I am super stoked for this final. First is because neither club has been to the MLS Cup Final before. So we have that going for us, which is awesome. Second of all, the players on both sides, we talked about rivalries, all right? So how this all came together, I don't know. This is just awesome. But both teams have a great player on their squad that has faced each other in the past on all different types of stages when it comes to soccer, okay? We already talked about Inter Miami, of them signing Lionel Messi, okay? The Argentinian standout is the most decorated football player in the world, okay? He's phenomenal. And for him to add an MLS Cup to those accolades is just going to be another notch to his cap, okay? So the dude's on another level. But who he's going to be facing is, I've been following this guy, honestly, since the Euro Cup in 2008, and it is Thomas Müller. And so he's from Germany. Part of my heritage is German, so the United States don't play in the Euro Cup. So whenever I watch the Euro Cup, I pull for Germany, and even to some degree with the World Cup. If the United States don't do well, which they typically don't in the World Cup, I will always pull for Germany. So I've always followed Thomas Müller's career since 2008. And I remember vividly watching the 2014 World Cup final of Germany versus Argentina and going berserk when Thomas Müller ended up doing an assist to Mario Götze, I believe, for the dagger. It was like a great goal, and Germany wins the World Cup in 2014, beating Argentina with Messi on the field. So that right there is another reason why this is going to be a fun matchup. But also, I did some research on this, is that they played each other multiple times when before Müller came over to the MLS, he actually played on Bayern Munich, which is the Bundesliga, is one of their best clubs in their league in Germany. And with all these different tournaments that take the best teams out of leagues to play in, like a Champions Cup or anything else, like any of these tournaments, Lionel Messi was on Barcelona for so long. And so those two would face each other all throughout their career, essentially. And I already talked about the World Cup. And so here they are again. They're going to face each other, but on the American side, sometimes people and personalities can be a good rival, right? So here we are. Here we are. It's just wild how this episode just kind of came out to be as it is. So anyways, the final is set. It's this Saturday, December 6th at Chase Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, where the Herons play, aka Miami. So they will host it. But this is the first time They have both played each other, first appearance for both clubs in the MLS Cup Final. But if you look at the bracket, and I'll go ahead and make the bracket full screen on here, you can see Vancouver had a little bit tougher time to get to the final, although they just squeaked by LAFC 4-3 in penalties at a tie at 2-2. But they definitely took care of business against San Diego 3-1, which is sad to see with San Diego with their first inaugural season here in the MLS, but here we are. So there they go. And then, but you look at Miami, and my goodness, they demolished Cincinnati FC 4-0 and then took it to New York City FC 5-1. So they scored 9 goals in the last 2 games. So it looks to be a very, very challenging opportunity for these two teams on both sides. I think it's going to be a great final. I'm hoping it's going to be a great final. Kickoff is at 2:30. But again, here we are. One team is actually going to lift up the MLS Cup for the first time in franchise history, and I love that. I love parity. I love that. Okay, so that kind of does it for today's episode. I wasn't able to actually look for any comments and do any research of that to prepare for today's episode, just because, life and work, and that's okay. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask me for next week's episode, please go ahead and comment below, and I would be happy to answer those for you. So I'm also looking forward to my quick hits. We got 5 weeks for the NFL before postseason starts. Let that sink in. 5 more weeks, and then we'll be talking about postseason, which is going to be fun. I just love the NFL postseason. It's fully here. We also have the NBA Cup Quarterfinals. All group play is officially done. We have our top 4 teams, and that quarterfinal won't start until next Tuesday/next Wednesday. And that will all be on Prime Video. So I'm very excited to see how or who is going to continue their dominance when it comes to the NBA Cup. And can anybody stop the Oklahoma City Thunder? They are 20-1 right now. Hello. I know we talked about an early season topic of okay, will the Thunder repeat as champions? It's looking like pretty good. It's looking pretty good if you ask me. But anyways, that's all I got for today, everybody. Catch the Lurks Lessons Show here on YouTube and on Spotify. And happy learning, and I'll see you next time.